The Earth was young. Not newborn, but not yet itself. It turned beneath the young sun, glowing with the warmth of a body not yet settled, a furnace wrapped in storms. To look at it then was to see not the calm blues and greens of oceans and land, but a restless, glowing sphere. From afar, it shimmered with red and gold, as if lit from within. On its surface, volcanoes erupted ceaselessly, sending rivers of lava racing toward boiling seas. Clouds of steam and ash hung heavy above, painted orange by fire, lit silver by lightning. Meteorites still fell, carving craters that glowed and then vanished as magma flooded in. But the most important change was not on the surface. It was not in the storms or the seas or the volcanoes. It was deeper. Beneath the surface, beneath the mantle, beneath the layers of fire and stone, the Earth carried a secret transformation, a reordering of its very body. It was time for the planet to grow a heart. In those earliest ages, the Earth had no true order. Its materials, iron, nickel, silicates, carbon, sulfur, were mixed like a stirred soup, suspended in the rolling currents of a molten body. There was no division between light and heavy, no true boundary between surface and depth. All churned together, restless and chaotic. Imagine a cauldron stirred by 1,000 invisible spoons, elements colliding, separating, mixing again. Iron might rise, float, linger, only to sink once more. Rock might descend, only to be carried upward on plumes of molten convection. The Earth was whole, but formless. It was like clay not yet sculpted, paint not yet brushed into image, stone not yet carved into shape. It was a world waiting for order. Iron had always been here, born in the heart of ancient stars, cast into space by supernovae, carried into the disk of dust and gas that birthed the planets. Every fragment that formed Earth carried some of it, the meteorites, the molten droplets, the wandering stones. But here, in the molten body of Earth, iron was restless. It was heavier than the stone around it. It felt the pull of gravity more keenly than lighter silicates and gases. Even in a world without order, iron longed for depths. At first it drifted in droplets, glowing beads suspended in seas of magma. Then it gathered into rivulets, streams that sank through molten rock. Then rivers, then floods, pouring ever downward, pulled not by will but by gravity, patient, merciless, eternal. The heavy heart of the Earth was beginning to stir. Deep within the planet, the first great descent began. Rivers of molten iron plunged toward the center, glowing storms beneath storms, hidden currents reshaping the interior. Droplets merged into streams, streams into torrents, torrents into vast floods of metal. As they fell, they displaced lighter stone, pushing it upward. The Earth began to sort itself, even without knowing. It was not sudden, it was not loud, but it was constant. The Earth was bleeding iron into its depths. Imagine the sound, though no ear could ever hear it. Great globes of molten iron collided as they fell, merging with thunderous force, releasing heat that spread through the mantle. Shockwaves rippled outward, cracks opened and closed, plumes of magma rose toward the surface. Every collision added heat. The descent of iron was not passive. It was violent, a storm beneath the crust. The sinking of heavy metals released enough energy to boil oceans, to melt mountains, to shake the very planet. The Earth's hidden storm was fiercer than any lightning, any eruption, any impact. It was a storm of metal falling endlessly inward. At the center of the Earth, the fallen metals began to gather. They pressed together into a glowing sphere, dense beyond measure, hot beyond imagining. Nickel joined iron, cobalt joined nickel, other heavy elements mingled in. The heart of Earth grew, drop by drop, river by river, collision by collision. It pressed tighter with every addition, gravity squeezing it, until atoms themselves shifted under the weight. The center became not only dense, but structured. The first outlines of the core had formed, a heart of iron, molten without, solidifying within. The surface of Earth still burned. Volcanoes roared, magma seas shimmered, lightning split the skies, but now there was fire within as well. The sinking of metals released unimaginable heat. The gathering of the core drove temperatures higher until Earth glowed not only from the sun, but from its own burning heart. The planet was no longer only chaos outside. It was chaos within, but chaos with direction. The Earth was forging its identity from the inside out. The heart of the Earth was alive. Its outer layers churned like oceans, molten iron flowing in restless currents. These currents swirled, collided, circled endlessly. But deeper still, at the very center, the pressure was overwhelming. Gravity pressed with such force that iron hardened even against the heat. The Earth had formed a dual heart, liquid without, solid within, a restless ocean of fire surrounding a crystal seed of iron. It would beat forever, driving the mantle, feeding volcanoes, shaping continents. The Earth now had a pulse. The Earth was no longer formless, it had become layered. At its center, a metallic core, around it a restless mantle, above that a fragile crust, above the crust an atmosphere. It was not yet calm, not yet stable, not yet the world we know, but it had structure, it had depth, it had an identity. The Earth was a planet with a heart. So the Earth turned, still glowing, still storming, still molten. But within it now beat a heavy heart of iron, pressed into permanence by gravity. It was restless, it was fiery, it was alive, but it was constant. The Earth had gained its core, its protector, its shield, its engine. It would burn for billions of years, creating mountains, feeding volcanoes, shielding skies, and one day making life possible. The Earth was no longer only chaos, it was a layered world, it was a world with a heavy heart. The Earth was vast, glowing, restless. It turned beneath a fierce young sun, wrapped in storms, crowned in lightning, cloaked in vapor. Its surface shimmered with fire, magma rolling in endless waves, volcanoes erupting without pause. The skies were red and orange, heavy with steam and ash, the air unbreathable, the oceans uncertain, boiling one day, vanishing the next. But beneath the surface, within the planet's molten body, there was no structure, no order. It was a world without layers. Imagine the Earth then as a great cauldron, its contents stirred by countless unseen hands. Every element was mixed together: iron, stone, silicates, gases, metals, water vapor, carbon. Nothing was separate, nothing was defined. Iron drifted alongside rock, nickel floated near gases, lighter elements sometimes sank, heavier elements sometimes rose, caught in convective currents. The laws of density had not yet claimed dominance. The Earth was not yet sculpted. It was a sphere of chaos, molten through and through. On the outside, the planet was no calmer. Volcanoes erupted ceaselessly, pouring rivers of lava across plains of stone that would last only moments before melting again. Mountains rose in fire, then fell into magma seas. Impact craters appeared in flashes, then were swallowed whole by molten flows. The surface was alive, but not permanent. Every feature was temporary, erased as soon as it appeared. The Earth had no continents, no steady crust, no enduring land. It was a world of impermanence. Beneath the surface, the chaos was even greater. Molten rock rolled in endless convection currents, lighter and heavier elements tumbling together. Iron mingled with silicon, oxygen with nickel, magnesium with sulfur. Nothing held still. Droplets of metal floated upward, then sank again. Lighter minerals dove downward, only to be carried back up. Everything was stirred together like soup. The Earth was full, but it was undefined. It was a body without a skeleton, a sphere without a heart. If one could have descended then, sinking beneath magma and mantle, one would not have found a boundary between regions. No clear shift between crust, mantle, and core. Only gradual change, only endless fire. The Earth's depths were uniform in chaos, molten in every direction. There were no layers to cross, no boundary to pass. It was silence, not calm but sameness, a silence of unformed identity. At the surface, chaos played differently. Clouds of steam rose endlessly, falling back as rain that boiled on impact, then rose again as vapor. Lightning flashed constantly, striking magma seas, igniting the skies with white fire. Ash rained down, mixing with molten stone, sinking into the crustless surface. The world looked alive, but it was not yet structured. It was still a canvas, waiting for paint. Within the earth, heavy metals drifted. They longed for depth, pulled by gravity, but they were not yet organized. They wandered in molten seas, suspended in flows of rock, scattered among lighter minerals. Iron waited, nickel waited. They had the potential to sink, to form a heart, but they had not yet begun their descent. The world was heavy with possibility, but possibility is not yet reality. Earth turned restlessly, storms above, magma below, but it had no structure, no identity. Other worlds had already begun their separation. Some smaller bodies cooled quickly, forming crust and core in haste. Gas giants grew massive, layered with dense centers and gaseous veils. Moons hardened, surfaces frozen, interiors divided. But Earth lingered. It was restless, but not yet ordered. It was powerful, but not yet defined. It was waiting. Occasionally, a fragile crust formed on the molten seas. Sheets of hardened rock floated atop magma, glimmering faintly in the glow of fire. For a time, they endured. But they were thin, brittle, and weak. Volcanoes split them, tides of fire drowned them, impacts shattered them. Each new crust was broken as quickly as it formed. The earth could not yet hold still. Its skin was fragile, its body molten, its heart undefined. The skies above mirrored the chaos below. Clouds of steam swirled endlessly, thick with ash and gas. Lightning carved through them in endless storms, striking the surface in bursts of white fire. Without continents, without oceans, without structure, the storms had no anchor. They roamed aimlessly, circling, colliding, breaking apart. The heavens were as restless as the earth itself. The earth was vast, molten, storming, but within it everything was mixed. No boundaries, no crust, no mantle, no core. It was a body without layers. It was a world without a center. It was a planet still unfinished. But gravity is patient. Gravity is relentless. Though the world was molten, though the elements were scattered, though the chaos seemed eternal, order was coming. The heavy metals could not float forever. The lighter minerals could not sink forever. The planet could not remain undefined. Soon iron would sink. Soon layers would form. Soon the earth would gain its heart. So the earth turned, restless and molten, storms above, magma below, unlayered, unformed. It was a world waiting for its identity, a sphere of chaos on the edge of order. It was a planet on the verge of becoming itself. The heavy heart had not yet descended, but it was stirring. And soon, the earth would never be the same. The earth was restless. It turned beneath the young sun, its surface glowing molten, its skies storming, its seas unsteady. Within its body, chaos still reigned, a molten blend of rock, silicates, gases, and metals, churning endlessly in convection currents. There were no layers, no divisions, no boundaries, only fire, only flow, only chaos. But gravity was patient, gravity was merciless. And gravity was ready to begin its greatest act, the gathering of the heavy heart. Iron had always been here. It had traveled across the cosmos, born in the death throes of ancient stars. When supernovae scattered their ashes, iron was among the heaviest gifts. It drifted through nebulae, wove itself into dust, and became part of the swirling disk that birthed the solar system. Every meteorite, every fragment that built the Earth carried some of it. Iron was woven into the planet's very body, scattered from surface to depth, mingled with lighter stone and silicates. But iron could not remain scattered forever. It was heavier than the rock around it, denser than the silicates, weightier than the magma. Every droplet felt gravity's call more keenly. Every bead was tugged toward the center. The Earth was not yet layered, but it was ready to become so. Deep within the mantle, droplets of molten iron began to gather. They glowed against darker stone, shimmering in seas of magma, restless in the currents. At first they drifted, small beads sinking slowly, carried downward by chance, but gravity did not allow chance for long. The droplets merged. They grew larger, heavier, faster. They began to fall through the magma like raindrops through storm clouds, glowing rivers pouring downward into unseen depths. The Earth's heart had begun to take shape. The sinking iron did not fall silently. It collided, merged, and clashed with other droplets. Each collision released heat, enough to boil magma seas, enough to send shockwaves outward. Rivers of molten metal flowed downward, cutting invisible paths through the mantle. They glowed brighter than the rock around them, fiery veins threading through the Earth's body. The planet groaned beneath the weight, shifting as its mass moved inward. Currents changed. Magma rose to replace what sank. The entire body of Earth was rearranging itself from within. The chaos above was mirrored by the chaos below. Imagine the scene, though no eye could ever see it. Deep inside, torrents of iron fell endlessly, glowing streams in oceans of fire. They gathered in the depths, clashing with other floods, colliding, merging into vast pools. The pools grew, pressed tighter, sank deeper still. They did not stop until they reached the very center, pulled to the core by gravity's unrelenting call. The more that sank, the more followed. Each drop strengthened the pull, each flood deepened the descent. The Earth's center was becoming heavy. The Earth's center was becoming a heart. The sinking of iron was not only movement, it was energy. Every descent released heat, every collision raised the temperature higher. Already the Earth had been molten from impacts and magma seas. Now it glowed hotter still, the descent of metals turning its body into a greater furnace. The Earth's insides were not cooling, they were burning brighter. This fire would never die completely. It would feed volcanoes, fuel continents, and drive the restless mantle for billions of years. The sinking of iron was the beginning of the planet's eternal fire. Droplets became rivers, rivers became floods. The mantle roared with motion as torrents of iron sank inward. Currents swirled faster, magma rose in plumes, cracks opened at the surface, volcanoes erupted in fury. The descent below was written in fire above. The Earth was not silent in its transformation. It shook, it burned, it erupted. The birth of its heart echoed in storms across its surface. The sinking of iron was a storm beneath storms. At the very center, the iron gathered. It pressed together into a sphere dense beyond imagination, glowing with heat. Nickel joined it, cobalt joined it, and other heavy metals followed. The core grew, drop by drop, river by river, collision by collision. It was still restless, still molten, still in motion, but it was no longer scattered, it was gathered. The Earth now had the beginnings of a heart. In the deepest reaches, silence reigned. No storms, no eruptions, no lightning, only pressure. Here the iron pressed tighter and tighter, squeezed by the weight of the planet above. Atoms themselves shifted, forced into new structures, crystalline and solid. At the center of the molten sphere, a solid seed formed, the first outlines of the inner core. It was small, but it was eternal. The sinking of iron changed everything. The planet was no longer uniform, no longer formless. It had boundaries now, divisions, layers. At its center, the core, around it the mantle, above that the fragile crust. The Earth was becoming itself. It was no longer chaos, it was structured. It was no longer only molten, it was layered. So the Earth turned, glowing from within and without. Its surface stormed, its skis boiled, its seas of magma rolled. But beneath it all, the heart had begun to beat. The iron had sunk, the core had gathered, a heavy heart was born. It would burn forever, driving the mantle, shaping continents, shielding skis. The Earth was no longer a sphere of chaos. It was a planet with a center. It was a world with a heavy heart. The Earth had changed. What was once chaos, iron scattered through mantle and magma, drifting aimlessly in molten seas, was now gathering. Gravity had pulled the heavy elements into the depths, and at the center they had pressed together, merged, and grown. The planet now had a core, but it was not a quiet, still sphere. It was alive. The core was an ocean not of water, but of liquid metal. Imagine descending into the Earth then, past the storming skies, past the magma seas, past the fragile crust and churning mantle. The heat would rise beyond comprehension. The pressure would crush all things. And then, at the very center, you would enter an ocean. It was not water that greeted you, not waves or currents of blue. It was a sea of molten iron and nickel, glowing brighter than fire, heavy and dense, flowing with currents stronger than any tide. It stretched across the Earth's center, surrounding the tiny crystalline seed of the inner core, a restless, glowing, eternal sea. This ocean of metal was not still. It moved constantly, currents rolling, waves surging, streams colliding. Molten iron flowed in great loops, pulled by heat, pushed by convection. Some currents spiraled downward, others rose upward, but all churned endlessly. The motion was violent. Rivers of metal collided with thunderous force, scattering droplets, crashing into one another. Each impact released more heat, feeding the fire. The ocean of metal was an engine without rest. At the surface of the Earth, storms roared, but in the depths, pressure ruled. Here, the weight of the entire planet pressed inward. Every atom of the molten core was crushed tighter than stone, squeezed until it flowed like liquid even at unimaginable temperatures. The deeper one went, the greater the pressure. At the very center, the crystalline inner core was forced into solidity by pressures so great that even molten iron froze. Around it, the ocean churned endlessly, molten but bound by gravity's grip. It was a sea no storm could disturb, no wind could ripple. A sea shaped only by pressure, by gravity, by heat. The core glowed with light unseen. It was brighter than magma, hotter than fire, glowing with the energy of a furnace that would last for billions of years. Its glow never reached the surface, buried beneath the mantle and crust, hidden beneath storms and seas, but its energy shaped the planet above. It drove volcanoes, it churned the mantle, it fed the restless skin of the Earth. The glow of the heart was hidden, but eternal. If the ocean of metal could have made a sound, it would have been a roar. Not the crash of water waves, but the grinding of molten streams, the booming of colliding currents, the endless thunder of liquid iron colliding with itself. The Earth's heart was not silent. It roared without pause, but its roar was locked deep within, inaudible to the skies, to the seas, to the stars. A roar that no ear could hear. The ocean of metal was not alone. Above it, the mantle churned too, restless with currents of molten rock. The two layers pressed against one another, iron and stone, core and mantle. Heat passed from one to the other, driving volcanoes above. The churning below fed the churning above. The entire planet was alive with motion, inside and out. The ocean of metal was the engine, the mantle was its breath. Together, they moved the Earth. Within the ocean of metal, hidden landscapes took shape. There were no mountains, no valleys, no continents, but there were currents, boundaries, shifts in flow. Some regions were hotter, brighter, and denser. Others were cooler, calmer, slower. It was a world unseen, but a world nonetheless. The ocean of metal had its own geography, its own restless terrain, a map written in currents and flows. The sinking of iron had released heat, and the ocean of metal held it. It radiated upward, feeding the mantle, driving convection, fueling eruptions. It radiated inward too, pressing the inner core into solidity, shaping the crystalline heart. This furnace would never go out. Even as the planet cooled, the ocean of metal would churn for billions of years, releasing its heat, driving the mantle, protecting the skies. The ocean was more than heart, it was life. With the birth of the ocean of metal, the Earth was no longer formless. It had gained structure, it had gained depth, it had gained permanence. The ocean of iron at its center would never vanish. It would churn for all of time, shaping the mantle above, driving the planet's evolution. The Earth now had a heavy heart that would endure forever. So the Earth turned, still glowing, still storming, still molten, but within it churned a secret sea, unseen but eternal. An ocean of iron and nickel, molten and restless, glowing with fire, roaring in silence. It was not water that filled the Earth's depths, not air, not stone, it was metal. The Earth was no longer only a sphere of magma, it was a planet with an ocean of metal at its heart. And that ocean would shape its future. The Earth had gained its ocean of metal. Molten iron and nickel churned at its center, glowing, restless, alive. Rivers of metal surged in loops, colliding in silent thunder, waves of liquid fire pressing against the mantle above. It was a hidden ocean, vast and eternal, shaping the planet from within. But this ocean was not the end. Gravity pressed harder, pressure rose higher, the ocean was pulled inward, condensed, tightened. It was no longer only a sea, it was becoming a sphere, the true heart of the Earth. This was the birth of the core. Gravity had always been the sculptor. It pulled iron from stone, drew metals into rivers, pressed them downward into oceans. Now it pressed harder still. Every droplet of molten iron felt its tug. Every current was drawn inward. Every river merged into the growing mass. The ocean pressed tighter and tighter and tighter still, until its center became something new. At the very heart of the Earth, pressure became unimaginable. The weight of the entire planet pressed down, forcing molten atoms closer than they could bear. And then, despite the heat, despite the fire, iron froze. It did not freeze like water into ice. It froze into crystal iron atoms locking together under crushing pressure, forming a solid seed in the very core. It was small at first, a sphere within a sphere, but it was permanent. This crystalline heart was the beginning of the inner core. Around the seed, the ocean of iron churned endlessly, molten and restless. But within it, at the very center, the crystalline inner core grew. Solid within liquid, crystal within fire. The Earth now had two hearts, a molten one, restless and moving, and a solid one pressed into silence. Together, they formed the dual heart of the planet. The molten outer core flowed in loops, currents, tides. It moved with energy, with heat, with force. The solid inner core endured, unshaken, a center of silence within the storm. The two together formed a rhythm, a heartbeat deep within the Earth. Though no ear could hear it, no eye could see it, the planet pulsed with life from within. The Earth was no longer only stone and magma. It was alive with a heart of fire. The gathering of the core released heat beyond comprehension. Every collision, every descent, every press of iron into crystal radiated energy. The mantle above churned hotter, volcanoes erupted fiercely, the surface stormed louder. But this heat would never die. Even billions of years later, long after the magma seas had cooled, the heat of the core would remain. It was the furnace that would never extinguish. Above the core, the mantle responded. Heat rising from the metallic heart drove currents of molten rock. Plumes surged upward, volcanoes roared across the surface, magma seas shifted and rolled. The birth of the core was not hidden from the surface. It was written in fire across the planet's skin. Earth's storms above were the echo of its storms within. Deeper still, the core pressed tighter. The crystalline heart grew larger, atom by atom, iron by iron. The molten ocean above it pressed harder, the mantle above pressed harder still. At the center of the world, the pressure was so great that iron behaved like no iron we know, denser, stranger, crystalline in patterns unseen anywhere else in the cosmos. The inner core was a jewel hidden in fire, a crystal buried in pressure. And it was eternal. With the birth of the core, the Earth gained identity. It was no longer a formless sphere of chaos. It was layered, structured, ordered. At its center, the crystalline core. Around it, the molten outer core. Above that, the mantle. Above the mantle, the crust. Above the crust, the atmosphere. The Earth had become a world of spheres within spheres, each layer shaping the next. The core was its defining heart. The molten outer core would never rest. Its currents would churn for billions of years, feeding the mantle, shaping the crust, fueling volcanoes. The solid inner core would never vanish. It would grow slowly, atom by atom, as the planet cooled, pressing outward with crystalline silence. Together, they formed an engine that would never die. The Earth now had a power source for eternity. No creature would ever see it, no eye would ever gaze upon it. But the core was there, always burning, glowing, enduring. It was the hidden heart of the Earth, unseen but eternal. The planet would cool, the magma seas would harden, the skies would clear, life would come and go, but the core would remain. The birth of the core was the moment the Earth became forever. So the Earth turned, its surface glowing, its skies storming, its mantle churning, but within it burned something greater, a crystalline heart surrounded by an ocean of fire. The molten outer core flowed in restless loops, the solid inner core pressed in silence. Together, they were the heart of the Earth. The Earth had gained its core. The Earth had become itself. Part VI, the layering of the planets. The Earth had gained its core. At its center, iron pressed into crystals, forming the inner heart. Around it, molten iron churned endlessly, restless currents surging like invisible tides. The planet was no longer formless. It had a center, a heart, an engine. But the core was not an end, it was the beginning. Because when the heavy metals sank, the lighter materials had nowhere to go but outward. Silicates, minerals, gases, all were displaced, pushed upward, driven into new realms. The Earth was not only growing a core, it was becoming a layered world. New moon, the rising of the light. As iron and nickel poured downward, lighter elements, oxygen, silicon, magnesium, aluminum, rose. They floated above the dense metallic floods, carried upward by currents of magma, lifted into realms of lesser pressure. At first, it was chaos. Plumes surged upward violently, molten rock boiling toward the surface, fissures opening, volcanoes roaring. The skies above rained fire as gases vented in storms. But slowly, the upward drift began to sort the planet. The heavy descended, the light ascended. The Earth was learning order. Fire oceans of stone. Above the metallic ocean churned a different ocean, an ocean of molten stone. This was the mantle in its earliest form, a vast domain of silicate rock, not yet solid, not yet calm, but no longer mixed with the metals below. It boiled and churned in its own currents, separate now from the metallic sea it once shared. The mantle was born not as calm land, but as an endless ocean of fire. And it was restless. Milky Way, the first boundaries. For the first time in Earth's history, boundaries began to emerge. At the center, the core heavy, metallic, hot. Around it, the mantle lighter, silicate, molten. Above that, a fragile skin of cooling rock that would one day become crust. The divisions were not sharp, not fixed. Heat blurred their edges, currents carried fragments across boundaries, but the pattern had been set. Earth was no longer a single sphere of chaos. It was a world of layers. New moon, the fragile crust. At the surface, magma cooled where it met the void of space. Sheets of rock hardened, thin as skin, fragile as glass. This crust did not endure. It cracked, sank, melted, erupted, but it formed again and again and again. Though fragile, it was the beginning of land. It was the first attempt of Earth to clothe itself, to cover its fires, to wear a shell. The crust was a promise that one day continents would rise. Fire the mantle's churn. Beneath the crust, the mantle rolled endlessly. Plumes of molten rock surged upward, cooled, and sank again. Heat from the core drove the currents, cycling stone like water in a boiling cauldron. It was not stillness, it was motion, constant and eternal. This churning mantle would one day move continents, build mountains, shape oceans. But even now, in the earliest days, it was restless, carving the first patterns of the layered Earth. Milky Way, the breath of the planet. The layering of the planet was not only stone and fire, it was air as well. Gases vented from the mantle, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, water vapor. They rose into the skies, thickened the atmosphere, cloaked the Earth in storms. Every eruption, every fissure, every crack in the crust breathed air into the heavens. The planet was exhaling, building its cloak above as surely as it built its heart within. New moon, the symmetry of layers. The Earth was no longer random. It was symmetrical, organized, layered by weight and density. At its heart, the metallic core. Around the core, the molten mantle. Above the mantle, the fragile crust. Above the crust, the cloak of air. The Earth had gained form, it had gained identity, it has become a structured world. Firestorms of transition. But the layering was not calm. Every shift released fury. The sinking of metals tore fissures open. The rising of silicates sent plumes surging. The crust cracked and sank. Volcanoes thundered across the surface. Lightning split the skies. Rain fell and boiled away. The planet shook as it layered itself, every adjustment written in storm and fire. The Earth was not quiet in its transformation. Milky Way, the first silence. And yet between the storms, silence appeared. Brief moments when the crust held steady, when the mantle churned without eruption, when the skies cleared enough to let starlight through. For the first time, the Earth knew stillness. It did not last long, but it was a glimpse of the calm that layers would one day bring. New moon, a world becoming. The Earth was no longer a molten sphere of chaos. It was a planet with a heart, a mantle, a crust, and a cloak of air. It was layered, structured, ordered. It was becoming itself. Sparkles the layering of the planet. So the Earth turned, still glowing, still storming, but now layered within. At its center burned the core, around it churned the mantle, above it cracked the crust, around it swirled the skies. The Earth had become more than chaos. It had become a world with structure, a planet with depth, a sphere of layers. And from those layers, everything else would come. The Earth had gained layers. The heavy heart had formed. The mantle churned above it, the crust cracked and healed, the atmosphere thickened with breath from volcanoes. But the story of Earth's interior was not finished. For at the planet's center, the weight of all the world pressed inward. Every mountain, every sea of magma, every breath of storm, all pushed down, 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 squeezing the iron heart tighter, deeper, denser. The Earth was more than fire, it was pressure. Imagine beginning a journey downward, past the cooling crust, fragile and cracked, past the mantle, boiling and rolling, stone behaving like liquid. Deeper the heat rises until no stone can remain solid, but greater than the heat is the weight. The deeper one sinks, the more the planet above presses down. At last you reach the ocean of metal, the molten outer core, glowing brighter than fire. It surges with currents, rolls in waves, collides in silent thunder. And deeper still, at the very center, there is silence. The silence of iron pressed so tightly that it can no longer flow. Here, pressure has overcome fire. At Earth's center, the weight is unimaginable. Millions of atmospheres press downward, every layer of stone and mantle above adding to the burden. Under such weight, iron cannot behave as it does at the surface. At the surface, it is metal, malleable, cold, gray. Heated, it is molten, glowing, restless. But here, in the core, it is something else entirely. Atoms are forced into patterns, squeezed closer than seems possible. The crystalline seed of the inner core takes shape, not because it is cold, but because it is crushed. The inner heart of Earth is solid, not from absence of heat, but from excess pressure. In this place, the familiar rules shift. Iron does not bend, it crystallizes. Molten fire surrounds it, but it cannot melt. The the laws of chemistry fold beneath the laws of physics. Matter is transformed under pressure. The core becomes not only hot, but dense, structured in ways unknown to the surface. Every atom is locked in patterns unique to this hidden world, a secret lattice formed in silence. The center of the Earth is a jewel no eye will ever see. The weight does not only press, it powers. The molten outer core is restless, surging with convection currents. Heat rises from below, cooler flows sink from above. These endless motions feed energy into the heart of the planet. The inner core presses outward with its crystalline growth, while the outer core churns in restless oceans of iron. Together, they form an engine, a dynamo, and a furnace. The Earth is alive, not only in surface storms, but in its very depths. Though silent to ears, the core roars in motion. Every current is a storm, every wave is an ocean crashing, every surge is fire in motion. The mantle above is carried by its heat, the crust is cracked by its pressure, the skies are fed by its breath. The core's roar is written everywhere, even if never heard. It is the hidden voice of the planet. The pressure of depth gives the Earth a pulse. The inner core grows slowly, atom by atom, as the outer core feeds it iron. The molten heart flows endlessly, currents circling in loops. The mantle above heaves with heat, carrying continents that do not yet exist. This rhythm is slow, deep, eternal. It is the heartbeat of the Earth. Every volcano, every mountain, every ocean yet to form owes its life to the pulse of the core. The pressure of depth not only created the core, it shaped time itself. As the Earth cooled, the core slowed the rate. Its furnace continued to burn, releasing heat upward, slowing the crust's hardening, keeping the mantle restless. Without the core, Earth would have frozen too soon. With it, Earth endured, alive with fire for billions of years. The core stretched time, keeping the planet restless long enough for oceans, for continents, for life. This was not only a heart, it was an engine. The churning outer core, driven by pressure and heat, created flows of molten iron that generated invisible forces. Though still faint, the first lines of a magnetic field began to stir. The pressure of depth had created not only stability, but protection. The Earth was gaining its shield. No creature would ever see this world, no eye would ever look upon it. But it exists, an ocean of metal surrounding a crystal, hidden beneath the mantle and crust. A realm defined not by land or sea, but by pressure, by fire, by silence. It is the most secret place on Earth, and the most important. So the Earth turned, still glowing, still storming. But within it, the weight of all things pressed downward, crushing iron into crystal, shaping oceans of metal, fueling storms of fire. The planet had gained not only layers, it had gained an engine. The pressure of depth gave the Earth its hidden heart, its hidden roar, its hidden pulse. And from that pulse, the planet would live forever. The Earth's heavy heart was alive. At its center, the crystalline seed of iron endured under crushing pressure, solid in silence. Around it, the molten ocean of the outer core churned endlessly, currents of fire and metal surging in loops, colliding in storms unseen. The mantle rolled above, volcanoes roared across the surface, storms shattered the skies. But now something new was stirring, something invisible, something powerful. The churning of molten iron was not only movement, it was a creation. In its restless loops, the Earth was weaving a shield of force. The magnetic awakening had begun. The molten outer core flowed ceaselessly. Driven by heat from the inner core, cooled by the mantle above, rivers of iron spiraled in endless circles. Some currents rose, lighter with heat, others sank, heavy with cooling. Together they moved like tides, like storms, like whirlpools. Iron is metal, and metal in motion carries force. Every current, every loop, every surge carried more than heat. It carried the seeds of magnetism. When rivers of molten iron collide, when they spiral in loops, when they move endlessly under pressure, they create more than motion. They create electricity. Invisible lines of force shimmered into being, threading through the molten ocean. They twisted, tangled, looped, merged. The Earth had become a dynamo, a living generator, a furnace not only of heat, but of magnetism. It was an awakening, silent, unseen, but monumental. Magnetic lines unfurled like threads in the darkness, weaving outward from the core. They curved upward through the mantle, piercing the crust, reaching into the skis. They arched outward into space, looping from pole to pole, encircling the planet in invisible grace. The Earth was no longer only stone and fire. It now wore a cloak of force. A magnetic field had been born. The young sun was fierce then, wilder than it is today. It hurled storms of charged particles into space, solar winds that battered every planet. Worlds without shields were stripped, their atmospheres thinned, their surfaces scarred. But Earth was no longer defenseless. Its magnetic field bent the solar wind, deflecting particles, getting them into arcs around the planet. The atmosphere was spared, the mantle was shielded, the surface endured. The Earth had gained a guardian. Where the solar wind touched the field, beauty was born. Particles funneled toward the poles, striking gases in the upper atmosphere. There they painted the skis with curtains of light, shimmering green, crimson, violet. The first auroras danced above magma seas, glowing above clouds of ash and lightning. Even in chaos, the Earth wore beauty in its skis. The field was invisible, but it was everywhere. It threaded through oceans of magma, whispered across the crust, stretched high into space. It surrounded the planet, unseen but constant, a silent guardian woven from motion. No eye could see it, no hand could touch it, but its presence was absolute. The Earth had gained more than a shield, it had gained an aura. The field steadied more than the atmosphere, it steadied the planet itself. The currents of the core, guided by their loops, gave rhythm to the Earth's interior. The mantle responded, the crust adjusted, the skis breathed in synchrony. The magnetic awakening was not only protection, it was balanced. Unlike storms, unlike eruptions, unlike crusts that cracked and reformed, the field did not vanish. It endured, cycle after cycle, orbit after orbit. As long as the core churned, as long as iron flowed, the field would remain. It was not a fleeting event, it was a gift of permanence. Not every world was so fortunate. Some planets cooled too quickly, their cores hardened, their fields died. Others never formed such currents at all. Their skis were stripped, their seas lost, their surfaces left barren. But Earth had endured. Its magnetic field had given it protection, it had given it endurance, it had given it the possibility of life. Earth was no longer just a planet of fire, it was a world with a shield. So the Earth turned, its core restless, its mantle churning, its surface storming. But above it all shimmered something new. Invisible lines of force, arcs of magnetism, a shield that deflected storms and guarded skis. The Earth had awakened its magnetism. The Earth had gained its shield. And that shield would endure for billions of years, protecting oceans, continents, and life, yet unborn. The Earth's magnetic heart had awakened. Invisible lines of force now arched around the planet, looping from pole to pole, stretching high into space. It was unseen, silent, untouchable, yet it was the most powerful guardian Earth had ever known. And just in time, for the young sun was fierce. Its storms raged across the solar system, solar winds screaming outward in rivers of charged particles, radiation streaming like cosmic fire. Every world in its path was battered, scorched, stripped. But Earth was no longer defenseless. It had gained a shield. The sun then was wilder than the calm star we know today. Its surface boiled with titanic flares, its corona hurled storms into space, its winds tore at planets without mercy. Streams of charged particles traveled outward at speeds faster than thought, striking atmospheres, eroding surfaces, stealing gases into space. Mercury, so close, was scorched bare. Mars, smaller and unshielded, would one day lose its sky. Even Venus, though cloaked in clouds, would suffer storms that stripped its water away. But Earth had something they did not. It had its invisible guardian. The storm arrived. Particles raced toward Earth, fierce and relentless, carrying the sun's fury on their backs. But as they approached, the field bent them. Its invisible lines guided them outward, deflecting their paths, curving them into arcs that swept past the planet. Like a river meeting a stone, the solar wind divided, flowing around Earth instead of through it. The atmosphere was spared. This invisible deflection created a realm of protection, the magnetosphere. It stretched outward into space like a bubble, a shielded domain where Earth's atmosphere could endure. Charged particles swept around its edges, carving bow shocks, leaving trails in their wake. The Earth now had more than a magnetic field. It had a fortress. A fortress against the sun itself. Not every particle was turned aside. Some were guided along the field, funneled toward the poles. There they struck the gases of the upper atmosphere. And the skies erupted in light. Curtains of green shimmered above molten plains. Crimson arcs blazed across storms of ash. Violet and blue ribbons danced above oceans of magma. The first auroras burned across the skies, beauty born of violence, the signature of a shield in action. Even as the sun tried to strip the Earth painted its defense in light. Beneath the shield, Earth's atmosphere endured. Without protection, the mantle's exhalations, carbon dioxide, nitrogen, water vapor, would have been torn away into space. Every eruption would have been stolen, every breath lost. But the magnetic field held them close. The gases thickened, storms raged, clouds gathered. The atmosphere endured. The shield was not only protection, it was preservation. Though oceans had not yet formed in full, their seeds were present, water vapor rising in storms, condensing in clouds, falling as rain that boiled away and rose again. Without the shield, even this cycle would have been stolen. The sun would have stripped water molecule by molecule into the void. But the magnetosphere bent the solar wind, preserved the vapor, and held it close. When oceans finally came, they would endure. On Mars, without a lasting field, the air thinned. Its seas dried, its rivers froze, its surface cracked and barren. On Venus, unshielded against the sun's fury, water was lost to space, leaving only a cloak of acid and heat. On Mercury, no shield existed at all. Its surface was left naked, scorched, silent. But on Earth, the story was different. Because it had a shield. The magnetosphere did not falter. With every storm, it bent the wind. With every flare, it guided the fury outward. With every assault, it preserved the mantle's breath. It endured day after day, storm after storm, orbit after orbit. And it would endure for billions of years. The shield could not be seen. It had no color, no shape, no sound, but it was there always. The winds could rage, the storms could roar, the sun could hurl its fury, but Earth remained cloaked in its guardian. The magnetic field was the invisible hand that protected oceans, preserved skies, shielded life, yet unborn. So the Earth turned, storms above, magma below, the sun raging in the heavens. But around it shimmered an invisible cloak, a magnetosphere of strength and grace. It bent the winds, deflected the storms, and preserved the sky. The Earth had gained its shield, and with it the promise of oceans, of continents, of life. The Earth's heart burned. At its center, the crystalline inner core endured in silence, surrounded by oceans of molten iron. Its churning outer core created invisible lines of force, a shield against the sun, a guardian of sky and sea. But the story of Earth's interior did not end there. Above the core lay another world, vaster, thicker, heavier than any other part of the planet, a realm of stone that flowed like liquid, of fire that behaved like water. It was the mantle, Earth's great middle layer. And when the core burned hotter, the mantle answered. It roared. The mantle stretched for thousands of kilometers, from the base of the crust to the outer core below. Though made of stone, its heat made it flow. Slowly, endlessly, it moved, like tar, like honey, like a sea of rock. It was not solid, not liquid, but something between. From the surface, one could not see it, but its presence was everywhere. Volcanoes, mountains, eruptions, continents, all were born from its restless churning. The mantle was the breath of the earth. The mantle moved because the core burned. Heat surged upward from the metallic heart, pressing into the stone above. Hot rock rose in plumes, buoyant, glowing, racing toward the surface. As it cooled, it sank again, heavy and dark, falling back toward the core. This cycle never ended, rising, sinking, rising again. Convection currents churned like slow storms, carrying the planet's heat from within outward. The mantle was never still. Sometimes the mantle's rising currents grew strong enough to break the crust. Plumes of molten rock surged upward, splitting the fragile shell, pouring across the surface in oceans of lava. These were not gentle eruptions. They were cataclysms, vast floods of magma, seas of fire that reshaped entire regions. The mantle roared in silence, but the crust heard it, and it broke. The mantle's voice was written in lava across the skin of the earth. The crust was thin then, fragile, patchwork. Every plume from the mantle split it apart, cracked it open, melted it down. Islands of stone drifted like rafts atop magma seas, forming and vanishing again. No continent endured, no mountain lasted. The crust was the mantle's canvas, painted over again and again in fire. Though the mantle moved slowly, centimeters each year, its power was absolute. Its weight was unimaginable, its volume vast beyond measure. Every plume was a roar, every current was a storm, every eruption was the mantle speaking. It did not rest, it did not pause, it roared endlessly, reshaping the planet's skin from within. In these early days, the mantle's movement was wild, chaotic. Crust cracked and sank constantly, recycled into the molten depths. But the pattern was forming. In time, this movement would become plate tectonics, the drifting of continents, the building of mountains, the carving of oceans. The roar of the mantle would become the motion of the world. Every breath of the mantle reached the surface through volcanoes. They vented gases into the sky, thickening the atmosphere. They exhaled carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and water vapor. They bled the planet's interior into the heavens. The mantle roared not only in fire, but in air. Every storm above was fed by the roar below. The mantle's movement was slow but steady. It pulsed like a heartbeat, carrying heat outward, carrying rock inward, cycling endlessly. This pulse connected to the core's furnace below and the crust's fragile skin above. It was the link between Earth's hidden heart and its visible face. Without the mantle's roar, the crust would never change. Without its churn, the core's heat would suffocate. The mantle was the bridge of the planet, the middle that carried fire outward forever. The storms of the mantle had no lightning, no rain, but they were greater than any tempest of the sky. Plumes of molten rock rose like mountains in motion. Currents carved unseen rivers across thousands of kilometers. Entire slabs of crust sank and melted, returning to the depths. The mantle was a storm that never ended, a tempest hidden within the earth itself. Upward, downward, rising, sinking, plumes and slabs, heat and cold. The cycle never stopped. It was not chaos, it was balanced. The mantle carried heat upward, cooled, and carried stone downward. In this endless rhythm, the planet found its breath. The roar was eternal. So the earth turned, its core burning, its shield shimmering, its crust cracking. And above the core, the mantle roared. It carried the heat of the heart into the world. It split the crust, bled gases into the skies, reshaped land again and again. The mantle was the Earth's voice, the roar of a planet alive. It had begun on fire, it would last forever. The Earth's heart burned within. The mantle roared above it, carrying heat upward in endless currents. And at the very edge of the planet, where molten stone met the cold void of space, something fragile began to appear. A skin. A crust. It was thin, brittle, impermanent, but it was the first hint of permanence. The Earth was learning how to wear a surface. When molten rock reached the edge of space, it cooled quickly. Lava hardened into dark sheets of basalt, stretching across the surface like brittle glass. For a time, these sheets endured. They floated like rafts atop magma seas, darkening the glow of the Earth, turning fire into stone. But they were weak, cracked by the mantle's plumes, shattered by eruptions, broken by impacts from space. Every crust that formed was destroyed, every surface was temporary. And yet, each time, the Earth tried again. The cycle was relentless. Lava cooled, rock hardened, crust formed. Then the mantle roared, magma surged, and the crust broke apart. But the Earth did not stop. The mantle poured new stone to the surface, the void above cooled it, and a new crust took its place. The planet was learning to heal itself, layer by fragile layer. The early crust did not yet form continents. It was scattered in pieces, drifting like rafts across molten seas. Some were small, islands of stone that vanished in days. Others grew larger, only to sink back into the mantle after centuries. They collided, cracked, overlapped, but slowly they thickened. The rafts of stone were the first sketches of continents yet to come. The skies above were not silent. Meteorites still rained upon the Earth, fragments left over from the chaos of planetary birth. Each impact shattered the crust, melted stone, and boiled seas of magma anew. Yet each time, the crust reformed. It was fragile, but it was persistent. The skin of the Earth could be broken, but it could not be erased. Volcanoes tore through the crust without pause. Fissures split open, fountains of magma surged skyward, rivers of fire spread across the surface. The crust was constantly remade by the breath of the mantle. It cracked, it healed, it thickened. Every eruption added stone to the skin, layering rock upon rock. The Earth was building itself upward, one eruption at a time. Above the crust, the skies began to change. As gases vented upward, the atmosphere thickened. Carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and water vapor gathered. Rain fell, boiled, and rose again. Clouds swirled across the planet, shading the crust below. Though fragile, the crust began to know shade, to feel the breath of cooling skies. It was the beginning of balance, fire below, sky above, crust between. Though it cracked and shattered, though it melted and reformed, the crust endured. Each cycle made it thicker, each eruption added to its weight, each fragment lasted a little longer. The Earth's fragile skin was learning to endure. This crust was not yet land as we know it. It was bare, volcanic, lifeless, scarred. But it was the stage upon which oceans would someday gather, the platform upon which continents would someday rise, the foundation upon which forests and creatures and civilizations would stand. It was fragile, but it was the future. The mantle roared below, the crust cracked above. Fire and stone danced in endless cycles, destruction and rebirth, fracture and repair. It was not a weakness, it was a creation. The fragility of the crust was the beginning of permanence. So the Earth turned, its heart burning, its mantle roaring. And above it all, it wore a fragile skin of stone. Thin, brittle, breakable, but enduring all the same. The crust was the planet's first surface, its first identity, its first promise of permanence. It was fragile, but it was the beginning of land. And from it, everything else would come. The Earth had changed. Not in an instant, not in silence, but in fire, in thunder, in endless cycles of creation and destruction. The heavy metals had sunk into the depths, pressed into a molten ocean of iron, then hardened at the center into a crystalline seed. Around it, the mantle churned endlessly, stone moving like water, roaring in hidden currents. Above it all, a fragile skin of crust cracked and healed, formed and reformed, layer upon layer. And for the first time, the earth was not formless. It had become a world with depths. It had become a world with layers. At the center, the core endured. The solid inner seed pressed into being by unimaginable pressure, crystalline iron locked in silence. Around it, the molten outer ocean of metal churned, glowing brighter than fire, restless and alive. Together, they formed a heart that would beat forever, generating heat, stirring the mantle, weaving the shield of magnetism around the planet. The Earth now had a center, it now had a heart. Above the core stretched the mantle, vast, heavy, endless. It was not solid, it was not liquid. It was something in between, something only the Earth could hold. Stone that flowed like a river, rock that bent like tar, mountains in motion too slow for any eye to see. The mantle was the breath of the planet. It carried heat upward in plumes and cooled rock downward in slabs. It roared in silence, hidden yet eternal. It was the great middle, the bridge between the heart and the skin. At the surface, the crust endured. Thin, brittle, scarred, it cracked with every plume, shattered with every impact, melted with every eruption. But it always returned, it always healed. This skin was fragile, but it was the first true surface of the planet. It was the beginning of continents, the promise of land, the platform upon which oceans would someday gather. The Earth now had a face, however scarred. Above the crust, the skies thickened. Volcanoes breathed carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and water vapor into the heavens. Clouds swirled across the skies, rain fell and boiled away, lightning flashed endlessly. The atmosphere was young, storming, unbreathable, but it was there. It was a cloak the Earth had made for itself, a shield against the void. The planet now had air, however wild. For the first time, the Earth was not chaotic, it was structured. It was a planet of layers, a heavy heart of metal, a restless mantle of stone, a fragile crust of rock, a storming cloak of air. The Earth was no longer a molten sphere of sameness. It was spheres within spheres, boundaries within boundaries. It had become whole. Each layer fed the others. The core burned and the mantle answered. The mantle roared and the crust cracked. The crust broke and the skies thickened. The skies stormed and the oceans to be began their cycle. The Earth was not many parts. It was one whole, every layer bound to the next, every cycle woven into the others. It was a dance of depth, a dance of fire and air. Other worlds in the solar system had hearts, mantles, crusts, but Earth's layering was different. Its core was restless, its mantle alive, its crust persistent, its shield deflected storms, its atmosphere endured. It was not only layered, it was balanced. It was a world prepared not just to exist, but to endure. The Earth would never again be formless. Its core might grow, its mantle might cool, its crust might shift, its skies might change, but the structure was permanent. The Earth would always be a world with layers. This was its identity, this was its shape. The chaos of the Hadean was still loud, still fiery, still storming, but beneath it all was permanence. The Earth had become itself. So the Earth turned, storms in the skies, fire in the mantle, heat in the core. But within it all was ordered, within it all was structure. The Earth was no longer chaos, it was a layered world. A planet with a heart, a breath, a skin and a cloak. The Earth was whole, and in its wholeness lay the promise of everything to come. At the center of the Earth, the heart burned, a crystal of iron pressed into silence by unimaginable weight. A molten ocean of metal churning around it, restless, alive, endless. This was the core, the planet's heart, the furnace within, the engine of all things. But the core, was not only a heart of iron. It was a pulse, a rhythm that beats through the planet, shaping every layer, feeding every storm, guiding every change. The Earth's pulse was slow, far slower than any creature's would ever be. It did not beat in seconds, but in millions of years. Heat rose from the core like the rhythm of a drum no ear could hear. Each surge drove the mantle, each breath split the crust, each cycle thickened the skis. The pulse was patient, measured, eternal. It was the rhythm of a world, not of a body. The core's heat came from many sources, from the great sinking of iron, from the compression of unimaginable pressure, from the decay of radioactive elements locked deep within. It was a furnace fed by its own weight, its own history, its own substance. And it would never end. Not for billions of years. The heat surged outward constantly, never pausing, never faltering. It was the pulse of the planet. The mantle above felt every beat. When the core pulsed heat outward, the mantle rose in plumes, carrying fire toward the surface. When the mantle cooled, it sank again, drawing more heat upward. The mantle was the body, the core was the heart. Every mountain, every volcano, every continent yet to form was carried by the pulse of the core. Above the mantle, the crust cracked with every pulse. It was thin, fragile, still new. Plumes from the mantle split it open, floods of lava poured across its surface, gases vented upward to thicken the sky. The crust was the skin of the planet, but it was not master of itself. It moved, it broke, it healed, all by the rhythm of the core below. The pulse of the core reached even to the surface. The atmosphere, too, was fed by the pulse. Every eruption that breathed gases upward, every fissure that vented carbon dioxide, nitrogen, and water vapor, all were driven by mantle currents, and all mantle currents were driven by the heat of the core. The core did not only shape stone, it shaped the sky. Its pulse was the reason the earth could breathe. The core's pulse also created magnetism. As molten iron surged in loops, currents of electricity rose, weaving invisible lines of force around the earth. With each motion of the molten sea, the shield grew stronger, deflecting the sun's fury, preserving the skis. The magnetic field was not a separate gift. It was the song of the core's pulse, written in lines of force. The shield was the pulse made visible. The pulse of the core was not quick, it was not violent, it was slow, steady, and patient. It was a rhythm measured in billions of years, a heartbeat that began in fire and would not end until the Earth's life was nearly done. Every cycle of continents, every shift of climate, every breath of life that would ever come owed itself to the patience of the core's pulse. The core was not only heart, not only shield, not only furnace. It was an engine. It powered volcanoes, drove mantle convection, split crust, created magnetism, built continents, preserved atmosphere. It was the hidden machine of the planet, running forever in silence, in fire, in depth. The Earth was alive because the core pulsed. No eye would ever see it, no creature would ever hear it. But the rhythm was there, slow and steady, carried in the cycles of stone and sky. It was hidden, but it was everywhere. The oceans to come, the mountains to rise, the forests to grow, all would be guided by the invisible rhythm of the Earth's heavy heart. So the Earth turned, storms in the skis, fire in the mantle, fractures in the crust. And beneath it all, in silence and pressure, the core pulsed. Slow, steady, eternal, a heartbeat of iron and fire, shaping every layer, protecting every breath. The Earth had gained not only a heart, but a pulse. And that pulse would guide it for the rest of time. The Earth had changed forever. It was no longer a molten sphere of chaos, no longer a shapeless body of mixed stone and metal. It had become something new. A world with a heart. A world with layers. The sinking of iron had given it a core. The furnace of that core had stirred the mantle. The mantle had split the crust, breathed gases into the skis, built the first fragile skin of land. And above it all, invisible but enduring, the magnetic field spread its shield around the planet, deflecting the fury of the sun. The Earth had gained not only structure, not only protection, not only balance. It had gained permanence. This was the lasting gift of the core. At the center of the world, the crystalline seed pressed into silence. Around it, the molten ocean of iron churned in endless loops. The core had become the planet's heart, and it would never stop beating. For billions of years, the core would give heat, give magnetism, give rhythm. Every eruption, every mountain, every continent, every ocean would rise and fall in time with its pulse. The Earth would never again be formless, never again be chaotic. Its heart was eternal. The magnetic field stretched outward, unseen but unbroken. It bent the solar winds, deflected storms of charged particles, and preserved the skis. Without it, Earth's air would have been stolen, its oceans would have been lost, its surface would have been scorched. But the shield endured, and because of it, the Earth endured. The lasting gift of the core was not only a heart within, but a guardian without. The Earth was not a single sphere, there were many. The heart of iron, the mantle of stone, the crust of rock, the cloak of air. Each layer fed the others, the core drove the mantle shaped the crust breathed the sky sheltered the world. The Earth had become a harmony of layers, each bound to the others by the furnace at its heart. This harmony was the lasting gift. The core's heat kept the mantle alive. The mantle's roar built the crust. The crust cracked and healed until it became thick enough to hold water. When the rains came, they would not vanish. They would gather, they would stay. The oceans would fill their basins because the crust endured, and the crust endured because the mantle fed it, and the mantle roared because the core pulsed. The lasting gift of the core was the promise of oceans. Mountains had not yet risen, but their seeds were here. The first rafts of crust floated atop the mantle, colliding, breaking, reforming. In time, they would thicken, they would rise, they would become continents. And beneath them, always, was the furnace of the core, driving the mantle upward, carrying continents across the surface in a slow, eternal drift. The continents existed because the core existed. The lasting gift of the core was the ground beneath all things. The skis were unbreathable still, heavy with carbon dioxide, sulfur, methane, but they were in the skis. Without the shield of the core, they would have been stripped. Without the breath of volcanoes, they would never have thickened. The air of the Hadean was hostile, but it endured, and because it endured, it could change. One day, life would breathe here. The lasting gift of the core was the breath of the future. Mars cooled too quickly. Its core froze, its shield died, its skis were lost. Venus never gained balance. Its shield failed, its oceans boiled, its air became poisonous. Mercury, too small, was stripped bare, its surface naked, its skis gone. But Earth was different. Because of its core. It endured where others failed. It sheltered skis, preserved water, and fed land. The lasting gift of the core was survival. The core was not only a furnace of the moment, it was an engine of time. It slowed the planet's cooling, stretched its history, kept it restless long enough for life to emerge. Without the core, the Earth would have been a dead world of stone and silence. With it, the Earth became a living world of fire and change. The lasting gift of the core was time itself. The Earth would change, but its heart would remain. Continents would drift, oceans would rise and fall, climates would shift, life would bloom and fade. But the core would still burn, still pulse, still shield. It was the planet's most permanent gift, the foundation of everything. The Earth was more than fire, more than stone, more than air. It was a layered world with a heart of iron. The lasting gift was forever. So the earth turned, storms in the skies, fire in the mantle, iron at its core. It had been chaotic, now it was structured. It had been formless, now it was layered. It had been fragile, now it was enduring. The earth had gained its heart, its shield, its balance, its future. The earth had gained the lasting gift of the core.